Why does everyone know you as Mama?
It started off in college because I have like a really high tolerance. So whenever people got sloppy, I would take care of them. And then eventually I had macro micro gaming where we had Apology Man, Julio, um, even Shroomed from Melee. But like I was kind of like their mom slash manager. Like it got to the point where I had to literally kick Beneath out of the bed and I was literally his mom during every major, and then they just called me Mama Dao.
A little birdie named Justin Wong told me that SoCal is the best California scene, the best scene in Street Fighter.
I can
True or
see that.
false?
I say true. Because Vi and Jimmy, they're doing a really good job, and they're like mentoring me.
They're mentoring you, so you have to say true.
Well, like, yeah. There's only so much I can do by myself, and I'm trying to like find other people to help support the NorCal scene too, but
Okay.
there's only so much I can do.
The reason I asked that, obviously, anyone who's ever been to a tournament in NorCal, or probably anywhere in California,
Yeah.
and anywhere that Alex Myers may or may not have been in the last few years, you've probably been involved with in some way.
Yeah.
And you were TOing the showdown tournaments, Churning the Butter, of course, which great tournament. I love tuning in, and then all of a sudden people stop showing up and you quit.
I
Is that
didn't
fair to say?
quit. I was more about like taking care of myself. Yeah. So
So
I
so so
decided
running tournaments got in the way.
I just had like a real hard look in the mirror and like I was like, how is this gonna support me in 10 years? And like, am I gonna be able to buy a house and stuff like that? So I went back to school to get a license and then just to have a fallback.
No, the reason I bring that up is because Churning the Butter was a great event weekly, and then you stepped down, obviously, for your personal reasons, which we've talked about in the past. Um, but it's kind of a shame because, I mean, after a while, players did stop attending for whatever reason. That's not your fault, and then you had to step down for your own reasons, and eventually that went away. I think they had their last one like I don't know a month ago or whatever it was.
Mhm.
So what I wanted to ask you though was during this time there was like just sort of a lack of a tournament scene in San Francisco, which had had a strong one for so long. Man, I remember like a year or two ago when everyone showed up to Churning the Butter, right?
Yeah.
What do you like? What do you think happened there?
Well, to be fair, a lot of our players aren't San Francisco based. A lot
Right?
of the really good players are in the South Bay, like San Jose area. And then so
Hmm.
like trying to make the commute, it was like an hour to hour and a half just for our players to drive there. And I think that just took a toll on everyone and it just sucked.
Recently, you decided to come back to tournament organizing and yelling at players during pools. You didn't do any work with Red Bull last year, correct?
No, not like
Okay.
directly.
So this year you got your chance. Who actually came up with, I guess, the idea first? Was it you or Red Bull for NorCal Rivals, right? That's the
Yeah.
proving grounds. Yeah.
Rick randomly DM'd me on Twitter and he was like, "What's your phone number? Can we talk sometime?" And I was like, "Sure." And I had no idea what was going on. And then so like he called me and I was like, "I'm in school." And he's like, "I know, but there's no one really I can trust besides you. And what can I do to basically get you back?" And then so we talked about it and then I eventually agreed to do the proving ground stuff.
So I don't know, how do you feel about going into this?
I had a lot of anxiety, not gonna lie. Like this is the first time that I'm not with a boss. Like I'm my own boss and I get to call all the shots. Like I thought of the name, I did all the advertising, promotion, everything. So like yeah, it definitely gave me a ton of anxiety. But Red Bull actually flew all the TOs out to Minnesota and we watched like a Red Bull production and it like really motivated all of us. And it was a good like team bonding experience. So like the other TOs helped supported me and like gave me encouragement. So I'm pretty confident at this point. And it's just I've been telling myself it's just a glorified weekly, just to get rid of some of the stress. And I was like, yeah, I can do a glorified weekly, no problem. Let's do this.
All right. So you were one of the first people I met. This is back, what, 2 years ago at Northwest Majors. Uh, when I first started covering fighting games as esports, and you're the one introducing me to everyone because, of course, you know everyone because you yell at everyone during tournaments as when you're running pools brackets. But one of the things that, as we've gotten to know each other over time, is that I've always found interesting is you know a lot of people, you've lived with different people because you've kind of run the quote unquote like FGC house, right? We see that works really well for players in Japan. I think we saw that work really well for guys like MOV and Eita and stuff like that. How do you feel that works or has worked for players, especially I guess in NorCal, but in general, like in the West?
Well, I actually don't do the house stuff. It's mostly Julio that invites everyone.
You got the John brothers living there. You've had different people come, come through.
Yeah, that's mostly like my landlord though. I'm very like outside of tournament stuff, I'm like super antisocial, stay in my room all day.
Because I think that where I'm going with this is the idea of there's sort of like this issue of, I guess, being sustainable in
Yeah.
competitive fighting games. It's hard. So from your perspective and knowing a lot of players and experiencing seeing what they've experienced, how hard is it to be sustainable in this kind of thing?
It actually depends. Like luckily for our house, the rent's super cheap. But Julio is like the only one that takes Street Fighter full time, and everyone else, like Kelvin and Brian, they're working full time still. And
Hmm.
like Kelvin's is working from like sometimes he doesn't even come home until like 9 o'clock. So I think it's really hard to support Street Fighter full time unless like you're super dedicated, streaming all the time, and you have a good team.
How much does Julio stream?
They're making him stream a lot more lately. Like I
And
think
they
every
being
day.
Aquafox, obviously.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
since he is injured, he can't play Street Fighter every day. So he's been just streaming like Witcher and like other new games, like flavor of the month games.
Right.
I think he's even coaching newer players too and streaming that, which is kind of interesting.
I have seen some of that, and I guess at some point, hopefully, we get to talk to him about that because I think that's an interesting issue where if you can't play, and you have to find, I guess, different ways to kind of stay in this thing. How do you do that? I suppose there's always TOing, right?
Yeah. Well, Julio's been playing a lot of chess, which is a great way to stay sharp.
It's interesting because I think I've seen him talk about that too. Okay, so from your perspective, see, this is the thing that kind of gets me too. Is like you guys live in the most expensive region in like all of the United States,
Yeah.
and you have all of this talent there that wants to play fighting games. I mean, if everyone had their choice, they'd play fighting games full time, right?
Hmm.
Or if you, I don't know what you'd want to do full time, but maybe you'd be TOing full time instead of course, having to look in the mirror and decide this isn't. I need something else to live. Um, how we're literally watching E League. We're seeing all of this production, right? And
Hmm.
again, you having experience with these tournaments and probably going to be experiencing more, especially with Red Bull and some of the stuff they do. Where do you think we are, like as FGC, as fighting games? Where do you think we are as an esport? Are we close to sort of like breaking through?
I think we're barely starting out, but then like we're also I don't know. I think we really know where we want to go and we have the idea, but just getting there is the hard part. And then just the production, like E League's so awesome, and I think that's going to be like the climax of production value. And like I'm just really excited to see where they take that. And then like there's still Evo on ESPN, and I don't know what they're gonna take that. So we'll
Right.
see how like the rest of the year is gonna turn out.
So talking about Red Bull, uh, last year they did a really good job of presenting new players to us, right?
Hmm.
Um, Given that it was sort of an amateur series, some of the more well-known players couldn't necessarily participate, or at least the ones that were regulars on the pro tour. Is there anyone? First, let me ask you: how do you think Red Bull Proving Grounds did as far as presenting these new players and regions for us all to kind of see and get to know, and who comes out of NorCal?
I really like the idea because we got Punk out of it, and like look at Punk now. He's like blowing up at like breakneck speeds. And
Hmm.
then from NorCal, they're all at the borderline of the Capcom points. like the requirement or like
Mm-hmm.
the break off point. But
Mm-hmm.
like there's still like Julio, Brian, Kelvin, Pavo. He's not really well known. I just want him to travel more. Pavocado, and we
Mm-hmm.
also have Winter Fox Samurai, who like he's technically Central Cal, but he's willing to drive up to NorCal.
Yeah.
But those are like the names that stick out to me that have a lot of potential, but they haven't tapped it yet.
So we know Julio, and if you don't know Samurai, that's obviously Mikey, who won a ranking event to get enough points to qualify for Capcom Cup, among other things. Uh, but for some of the people that maybe don't necessarily like, I know who the John brothers are, of course, Kelvin and Brian. Um, both were at West Coast Warzone last year, which was the first event I got to go to for Yahoo. But for those who don't know the John brothers or actually Pavocado, what can you say about them? What makes them kind of stand out compared to other players in NorCal?
Well, it's just they're super passionate about the game. Like Brian, he's always trying to find ways to improve himself and he always wants people to play with. Like every time Alex comes to visit, they're always just like, "Hey, let's go play." And then Kelvin, I think he's like a hidden demon because he doesn't go out very often, but like
Mm-hmm.
the talent is still there. And like if he does go out, he destroys everyone. And then Pavo, he's very quiet. Like very to himself, but he's like kind of funny here and there. But he doesn't really know how to promote himself to a point where like teams would notice him or people would notice him. But he has like a really good Mika. Also, there's Matty Pie is our
Mm-hmm.
Ibuki player too, and Ram who qualified for Proving Grounds last year. So those are like our hidden characters.
How do you promote your events? Like how, especially going into this Red Bull Proving Ground series, what have you learned? What do you change, or I guess apply to promoting these events compared to what you've done in the past?
Well, as soon as I found out I was doing this, I downloaded a ton of marketing audiobooks. So there's one that stood out to me called Growth Hacking, or it's like about growth hacking, and that it's basically just like using social media to like a virus spread out by itself. So that's how I thought of like the Who's Your Rival campaign, and then like by tweeting that out, I think the rival and like the person calling them out kind of started an online beef, and people love to watch that. And that was like my biggest idea so far. And then I'm just trying out new things here and there and see what works.
We're seeing a large expansion into fighting games this year. Maybe not necessarily through like esports organizations or teams or sponsors, as we've, I guess, come to call them, but definitely in like tournaments. I mean, we're watching E League right now. Capcom Pro Tour still around, of course. They've changed things to kind of improve the tournament series. Of course, Red Bull Proving Grounds is back. Red Bull Kumite is coming up. Um, how do you feel about that expansion and what it does for the tournaments? I mean, we're seeing more, of course, larger tournaments, but people might be worried about some of the grassroots stuff too. Like, how does all of this affect grassroots stuff?
It's definitely making grassroots a lot harder. Like I've seen that. Like if I were to do this by myself, I don't think I'd be able to do it without Red Bull support. Like the production value is getting to be a really big deal. Like if it doesn't look cool, people won't be interested. So that's why I had to call like the 10-0 guys, and they're gonna make
Mm.
my stream look badass. But yeah, like if you have a stream with like no name commentators or like no player cams, it's really hard to watch.
Do you think? I mean, production value is important, I think. But do you think there is a misperception or misconception about how much production value is needed for some of these events? Like, is the expectation too much? I mean, E League.
Uh,
We're looking at E League, and it's like now everyone's expectation is like it should all look like E League, and it's that's just not a reality.
well, like invitationals, I think should have like the battlegrounds e-league kind of production. But like if it's
Okay.
a monthly or a weekly, just do your thing. And then like so the deal that I did with Tenno is they're actually using my event as a training grounds for their new staff. So like I'm not
Okay.
expecting anything big, and it's if it's helping other people that I'm down, I'll just let them practice.
Fighting games are weird, right? When we go to tournaments, generally most of the people that are attending the tournaments are people that are also competing.
Mhm.
Um, but as we see these things, again, going back to E League, Red Bull, Capcom Cup, Evo, all this stuff, we're trying to grow this scene as like a spectator sport also. And when you have the spectators right now that are actually attendees playing these games, I think that makes it difficult. So how, when you look at from your perspective as a TO, how do you get more people in the door that aren't even necessarily just players? You just want people to see this thing.
Well, in the past, I've hosted like viewing parties at Buffalo Wild Wings and like other bars, and the random people will just go like, "Hey, this is pretty cool." Like it originally started off in the patio only, and then so many people asked to put it on the main projector and TVs that like eventually the whole restaurant was watching. And then like tournament wise, I've been going out to the smaller locals and helping them promote their events because I feel like at the weeklies they prepare for monthlies, and then at monthlies they're preparing for like majors. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a huge like support system that we have in order to like nurture the players and even the spectators. Like sometimes it's really hard to make friends.
um, I think one of the reasons I asked that is because when I think about, obviously Capcom Cup is a huge deal, right? But when it's at PlayStation Experience, I know because I have a background in general games media. I know a lot of people that attend PlayStation Experience and they go to Capcom Cup because they're just like, oh, it's Capcom Cup, right? And they're not fighting game fans or anything like that. And they attend this thing and they're like, man, this is really cool. But the trick is to either get them to get interested in these games or just follow the scene. Is there any way that I guess someone like yourself or any of us can I don't know if it's tricking them or what. Like how do we get these people more invested in our game so they pay attention more?
I want to use my brother-in-law as an example
All
because
right.
like he slowly just got into it because he saw Alex playing, and then eventually I invited him out to the viewing party I talked about, and he was like, "Whoa,
Mhm.
this is kind of cool, like an MMA match kind of thing," and then he just kept asking questions, and I took him to an event at Corsair, and he entered his first tournament, and then like he's just been slowly coaching himself by watching videos, and I don't I don't know where I'm going with this though. It's really hard to just get someone into the game like out of
It
nowhere.
is. It is.
But like with me as a TO, since I'm not playing and I'm not really doing anything important, I'll go up to like people and like ask them questions and talk to them. And like, "Hey, do you want to try playing sometime? Cuz I'm not good." So if they beat me, maybe they'll get like the adrenaline rush from the game. Like
So
same
you
thing
are
with like
literally tricking people into playing Street Fighter
yeah,
by
don't tell anyone this. But I'm the confidence booster. I used to take crack feed and I'll go, "Hey Anthony, go up to that guy and like play him and tell him what he's doing wrong." So like I'll have my players try to coach newer players to help them like, "Oh, this is kind of fun," kind of thing.
Does that work?
Yeah, like I've had so many people just sit and stay, grab a beer
Okay.
and just chill and talk about fighting games.
I mean, he's never done that with me, but
Next time.
um, anything else maybe you want to plug? I don't remember all the dates. Maybe you want to plug NorCal Rivals.
So all of the proving ground events are going to be the first Saturday of every month. So that's like
Okay.
pretty easy to remember, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to try to keep aiming at Dave and Buster's because it's really fun. But I have a couple other venues that I want to try out that I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say yet, but it's pretty cool.
All right. So if you're in the NorCal area, of course, tune into there. So your first event will be April 1st?
April 1st. Yeah, it's not a joke. Everyone keeps asking me if it's going to happen or not.
Okay. Mama Dao, of course, it's always great to talk to you. I hope to see you in person soon. I know you've been busy, so you haven't hit up all these events in person in the last year or so. That's unfortunate. But good luck with Red Bull Proving Grounds, and we'll see you when Seattle beats you guys.